Welcome to part two of me sharing about my story as an artist, my life as an artist, my life as a person. Those intersect a lot. And then using that as a takeoff point to get you thinking about your own life, whether that's as just as a person or as an artist or someone who loves art, and even just thinking about art and culture and what it really is and where it comes from. And it's been really fun. So if you want to see part one, you can find that in the description below. But this is the teen years. In part one, I did talk a little bit about the choir I was in that was internationally excellent, competed internationally, won. I got to be a soloist sometimes with that choir, and that kind of experience just completely transforms your life when you're young and you get exposed to that kind of excellence and are challenged in that. And actually, even that our director, Phoebe Voights, just demanded so much of us. She really believed that a child, because I was a child when I started with them at 8, that a child could create world-class music. And she was right, we could, and we did. And so from a young age, I was already living at that level of excellence that a lot of people only dream of their whole lives. So I stayed with that choir until I was 14, and then life got really busy and hard, I guess 15, because I wanted to do more solo work. I wanted to have the flexibility to play sports and be in the musicals in high school, which I'll get into a little bit as well. And so I ended up leaving the choir when I was 15, but it would just completely change my life to that point. And that, and also taking piano lessons, was really critical to both my musical education, but also my education as a person, this real formation as a person, especially in discipline. And I remember I wrote a letter to Phoebe at one time expressing that she had been such an important part of my story as a person. And I know there are advanced studies, I'm not going to look them up right now, but there are advanced studies about the value of musical training for the mind, and how a lot of children who go through formal musical education actually do become smarter and more capable of doing academic work and excelling in all kinds of areas. And that was certainly my experience, that it really did form me into just being a better person all around and able to live virtuously in all kinds of areas of my life. As I said, I always like to apply this to you and to the whole cultural conversation that we are having, and maybe need to be having more and more, particularly in North America, about the value of the arts. And I can say from a hyper personal perspective that what I received really did set me up for the whole life I've been able to live as a person, intellectual, and as an artist. And I want that for as many kids as possible. So it's one of the reasons I have a little singing course that I offer, because I want every child to have at least some echo of the experience I got to have with the choir and via the expansive musical education I had access to. But as I said, I couldn't stay involved with the choir precisely because the standards were so high and the commitment was so high that I found it just became more and more in conflict with the things that I wanted to do for developing more of my own voice, my own artistic experience. So I was at a high school where we had musicals every year. I was in the choir, I was in vocal jazz, I was taking voice lessons later on in high school. And just, we had lots of opportunities for me to develop as a performer. And how's the phrase, do not spurn humble beginnings? The truth is, high school is an amazing place to develop as a performer. You've got this built-in audience of 1,000 people and they're your peers. So if you need to develop some thick skin, that's a way to do it, is getting in front of the people whose opinions you really care about and lay your heart on the line as a performer. So we had regular variety nights and talent shows and I did every single one I could. I never missed one. And it was so important for me to have that experience of being in front of people and learning how to use a mic and learning how to have stage presence and learning how to interact with an audience and prepare. That was one of the things too that I got from the choir, was this real sense of the reality of what it took to prepare well. It's something that takes a lot of people a long time to learn, way into adulthood, even as performers. But the reality is, if you want to perform at this level, you have to rehearse to this level, is actually the way to look at it. Whereas a lot of people think that if you practice, somehow magically on that day of the performance, you're going to hit your stride and have the best performance of your life. And you know what? Sometimes it happens that way, but usually not. Usually there's so much going on in the room with the sound, your wardrobe, whatever. You've got so many things in your mind and you're a bit nervous and you're not breathing the same way and you're a bit distracted by that boy you like sitting in the third row or whatever it is. Like there are so many things that come to distract you that if you don't have it deep, deep, deep in your memory, your muscle memory even, and the neural pathways built really strongly, it's going to be really hard to perform well. And so that's what a lot of people learn the hard way is it's easy to kind of completely fall apart on stage if you haven't done that preparation. So that's something I really got from the choirs. We just rehearsed and we rehearsed and we rehearsed and we knew what it was to feel that we had nailed it and that we had that level of comfort so we could go in with confidence. And that's the other thing too, as an artist, and this has a lot of application to both artists and just people, anybody wanting to do anything of substance, is if you want to be able to deliver something with confidence, you have to have it deep enough already inside of you that you're not distracted by it. So you can have it there almost as an assumed thing and then focus on the emotional delivery, right? And so high school gave me so many opportunities to translate what I had learned in that choir over to my own work as a singer and a budding writer. And that's something else that was going on in those high school years. I was very grateful for that piano foundation. I did not practice as much as I should have, and I didn't develop in the way that I maybe could have. But it did give me this groundwork for chord structure and being able to write my own music and accompany myself. And that became the goal into my late teen years into adulthood, which I'll get into probably in part 3. But I knew enough of the basics of chord structure that I could start to write songs. And I did start to write songs. And I think I did perform a couple of them even at that time. And again, just an incredible training ground for becoming who you are is if you make use of those resources in high school. I feel so sad for so much of Gen Z that is so distracted by their phones because I spent so much time in high school learning how to sing. Like I had a lot of really good opportunities, but so much of my own vocal development came from just being bored enough to listen to a song and think, I want to try to do that. And then recording myself until I sounded like what I had heard. Or getting bored enough to just start playing around with words or like an emotional experience that I was present to because I couldn't numb it away with scrolling. And those songs, even the ones I wrote I think I probably started when I was 14, and some of those I still think are really good. There was something real already happening in my life as an artist and a writer, even at that time. And so I think that is something that's also worth having a big conversation about. And this is why I love telling stories, because it becomes a great takeoff point for things that we need to talk about. And it's that boredom that was so much of our birthright, I would even say, until so recently, is the stuff of creativity, is the stuff of artistic development, and all kinds of development. I mean, the kid who wants to be a basketball star, when does he get those reps in, those layups in over and over and over again? It's when he's bored and he goes outside and he does it for an hour, Whereas that same kid now has a phone. What do we do about that? I'm not anti-tech, but I think these are things we really have to think about if we want to be able to preserve the human, and especially, I would say, great art and this very natural, innate human impulse towards creating. I think we have a lot of questions we have to ask about that. One other thing that I know I mentioned in part 1 that I see a continuation of here in my story too is that these things inside of us are really there from the get-go, from jump. It's amazing. So that same writing gift, that fascination with words, that desire to express this intensity that I felt in my heart and my mind all the time outwardly, and wanting to express it outwardly as an artist, that was there as a child, and then it continued to unfold, into my teen years. And I'm so grateful that I did have parents, as well as, I guess, a culture around me enough in both the school I was at and then also my city, which I mentioned as well. It's a small city, but it has this disproportionate production of artistic excellence, especially for its size. We were able to compete and win internationally, and that was so, in the choir I was in, and that was so remarkable. But it really does speak to the fact that we need artistic culture around us. We need shared interest, and we need to have the ability to pursue our interests, and we need people around us who can spur us on to develop, and also just develop a bit of a network of opportunities for us to become what we're supposed to be. I think it's easy for me to forget just how important that stage of my life was, and how all of those people who showed up to teach the music classes and run those events, it was students and teachers giving so much of themselves just for the sake of the arts, for the sake of culture, for the sake of artistic development. And yeah, the truth is most people don't go on to be professional artists. That's something that I fought for, and I am very grateful that I've had so many opportunities to grow into. But just seeing the value of producing that good soil for people to have this deeply human experience of beauty and the inner life and storytelling for the richness of their lives, and to provide the groundwork for people like me who maybe have a vocational calling in the world as an artist. And so that time, that formative time, is so important. One of the most interesting parts of this part of my story is that I auditioned for and was accepted to Canadian Idol. And so I got to go with my mom on the top 100. I made the top 100 round. I went with my mom. They flew us out to Toronto, and I still remember planning out all of my outfits. I remember getting my spray tan and my triple barrel curling, It was such an amazing experience. And I was just 16. And that experience was so important for my development as an artist. It was this really critical approbation that I needed to know that I wasn't just, even though now I have the perspective that the level of excellence I was experiencing in my high school in that choir was top notch, but I didn't have enough life experience to really understand that at the time. So having that external validation from people that were deep in the music industry telling me that I had a real talent, both by directly telling me and then also giving me the gold ticket to go to Toronto and compete, was so important for me to just have that confidence that this innate gift that I felt that I had was real. It wasn't just something that was kind of for some friends to listen to at a high school show, but actually could be the beginning of a real career in music. And the other thing I'm so grateful for often about that experience is to have had that encounter with the behind the scenes of that industry, the entertainment industry, the music industry, was so helpful. And it's because I saw so quickly that it's all fake. You see behind the curtain and you see that so much of what comes out the other side is not at all what you think. So for example, if people remember how those shows were, the Canadian Idol was very similar to American Idol. If there are Americans watching, I'm sure similar. Any of those shows that you see on TV have a similar model, would be my guess. They have 2 producer rounds before the one that they film, that they share with the viewers, with the audience that watches it on TV. So one, people just don't know that that's even part of it, or that it's that rigorous to get to that point. But also it means that when you see somebody being filmed and they're not very good and then they're mean to them, like that was part of the plan. Like they got them through 2 producer rounds in order to have some like lower quality options to make for interesting entertainment, right? And then I remember the host of the show at the time, like I remember seeing his face just like drenched in makeup. And at the time, I was 16, it was like the 2000s, right? I didn't even know men could wear makeup. It hadn't ever even come to my mind that that was something that anybody would do. And I just remember being so put off because he's quite a handsome guy, but this thick makeup on him was so odd and so disenchanting to me. And just generally seeing all of the personalities and the insecurities and everybody just kind of vying for their place and knocking people over. And I wasn't there that long. I got through the first round in Toronto, maybe the second round too. I can't remember. And then I was cut. And so I was only there for a couple of days, and you see a lot of human nature even in that. And it's a very intense couple of days. And so I've just always carried that experience with me. And I think it's worth sharing, because I think a lot of people who have artistic dreams have this idea of it being something that it's not. And the reality is, you have to really know who you are and what you're about and what you want to accomplish, because there are a lot of people with different kinds of interests around you making decisions based on totally different principles than you are. And so that Canadian Idol experience was really interesting, and maybe in another time I'll share more about it, but it was totally fascinating to have that experience, that encounter. And then also things I maybe won't get into right now, but seeing in myself the struggle already, even with something pretty low level at that time, but really seeing in myself this willingness to, or struggle to maybe compromise on things already that I knew were sort of required of me to advance. And that was also something that was this beautiful opportunity for me to evaluate who I wanted to be if I were going to pursue a career in entertainment. And having that chance at 16, like so young, having that chance so young to really think through what the cost was going to be, morally, artistically, there was a lot there that I just think was so valuable for helping me develop a roadmap for my whole story as a singer and writer. Now, one thing I would want to share from all of this to anybody listening, whether you're an artist or somebody who loves the arts or just has general interest in people's stories and your own story, is that there's this really incredible thing that happens from a variety of interests and experiences. And that richness is something that becomes a storehouse to draw from, to become who we are. And I think especially as artists. So the fact that I was able to travel so young with the choir, we went, like I said, we went to France and Spain and had just this really rich cultural experience, getting to know people from all over the world in these different choirs and different cultures, different languages, all of that exposure was amazing. And then going on Canadian Idol and marrying that with my day-to-day experience as a student and developing my gifts as a songwriter, all of that really does contribute to the whole. And life is so rich and so available to us. And I know some pieces of my story sound impressive. You don't necessarily need to be doing things that seem to be impressive, but really what's most important, and I talk about this in my video a little bit about what it is to be a successful artist, that you really just need to live life deeply. You need a lot of life experience, and you need to live it really deeply, because that's where so much of the richness and raw material for a good life is, and certainly the life of the artist. One of my other big lessons from this part of my story too is that taking risks is so important. I remember my first big performance singing. I think it was, what did I sing? I think it was Sarah McLachlan's Adia. And I was so nervous before, and my mom had to really talk me down from quitting, basically. And I'm so glad, because what would have happened? Like, maybe I would have tried again the next year if I'd given up at that point. But I think having the courage to take risks, even what seems like a fairly small risk now, that dictated my whole life, right? You build on these successes, having the strength to take risks and pursue things. And I mean, auditioning for Canadian Idol was a big, vulnerable risk. It felt really stressful to put myself and my voice and my dreams on the line like that. And although I didn't win, it was certainly a valuable experience in response to what I gave to pursue that. And then even things like just being in the musicals and having a different experience. And then even something, this is kind of a funny story to end on, but in our grade 12 fashion show, I could have sung anything. They had asked me to sing, and I had free reign to choose what I wanted to sing. And I chose to sing Natural Woman by Aretha Franklin. So even though I've been saying that especially in part one, I was talking about how I became this very introspective songwriter in relation to the songwriters that I admired, and then also a lot of the sad experiences I had growing up. Obviously, I still had that performer instinct in me, and I knew it was kind of risky. It was a hard song to sing, and it was definitely not what people were expecting from me. And I just remember loving it. You know, it was just such a joy to perform this crazy song at the fashion show. And I still think about that to this day. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of my story, and I can't wait to share part 3 about the early adult years and encountering the record label and traveling around the world and my first album and all that good stuff. So I hope to see you soon.